So I am currently the only Indigenous Native American elected official here in the Kansas State Legislature. And I've had a wonderful experience in the House. Though in the Senate, I feel like there's a lot more opportunity to be more involved in the political process. And especially with Native American issues, it'd be really nice to have that opportunity to be on the front lines and kind of see those issues and handle them on that side, and to be more involved in the state of Kansas government year round. There's 125 of us in the House and 40 in the Senate. So it's a bit of a fight to try and get spots on interim committees, to be appointed to different types of issue-based committees as well throughout the year. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to be more engaged and to have that opportunity at the state level, but also to represent my community as a whole. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and the district for the Senate covers most of Lawrence. And we have a really high urban Native American population. I was born and raised in Lawrence, and share similar stories of a lot of our parents in Lawrence going to Haskell Nations University, myself too. And it's just an amazing opportunity to represent the city of Lawrence, and all that we do, at a bigger platform. So I'm really honored to have this opportunity to be in this spot. So at this moment, looking at who's filed, I'll probably be the youngest in the Senate side as well. Having that lived experience in the Senate, I don't see that represented now. I'm 28, I'm a renter, I have student loan debt. I've worked 4 jobs last year just trying to pay rent. And there were times where I had to go to our food pantry. So these are lived experiences that our elected officials on the Senate side, I feel like, don't really have or hear those issues brought to the table. And I'm really excited to put those issues to the forefront, and to be that representative for young folks who really want to live in Kansas and stay in Kansas, but they might not feel like their voice or their representation is held on that side. And the Senate controls a good majority in many legislatures as well. Legislation that seems to be of a priority in Kansas are not the message or issues that young people and young adults are asking for. When we door knock and we talk to our constituents and we interact with them, they're not asking for flat tax. They're asking for, how can I have an affordable way to live here? How can I find childcare and affordable childcare? And how can we live in a more inclusive environment and more welcoming state? One of the big things is environment and the environmental issues that young people are champions of. Not only millennials, but Gen Z are such a loud and presence in our political system, and especially in Indigenous communities, where these ideologies are not being reflected. We're seeing legislation of trying to not progress conservation efforts. We're seeing tribal nations in Kansas promoting regenerative agriculture, but we're not seeing those same efforts and care and time at the state level. So it's really important that we bring these lived experiences and this Indigenous knowledge in these spaces where it could also benefit our state and our community. Legislators don't have that experience, and oftentimes will debate bills, and they'll be like, when I was in high school, but when they were in high school, it was definitely 40 or 30 years ago. And when I was in high school, I wasn't using iPads. So that's why we need these representation and these lived experiences in our legislature, because a lot of times legislators are referring back to their period of time there. And I mean, there's a lot of issues that need that new perspective. I always say having young moms in the legislature is always a win, no matter what political affiliation, because women are underrepresented in legislators as well. I think Kansas ranks sort of in the bottom half of that representation of gender. Folks who are LGBTQ plus or non-binary and trans folks, there are a lot of legislation against these different types of marginalized communities, and we need that representation. That presence alone in the Capitol is so impactful, and I've seen it myself firsthand, that representation alone, that presence alone in the chamber has stopped legislation. So I really say, if you have those resources and you have that support, it's really worth putting your hat in the ring, and fighting for your community and fighting for the values. Because if you're not here, somebody is, and they're fighting against your interests and folks like you. Oftentimes, we're working on pieces of legislation of like human trafficking, of housing, and healthcare, and those have a different, I would say, understanding, especially like I seek services at Indian Health Center at Haskell. So when we're talking about healthcare and when we're talking about Medicaid expansion here in Kansas, as an urban person, that's not being talked about in the committee, especially when Kansas had the abortion amendment on the ballot. What abortion care looks like for Indigenous birthing people is so different than someone who is not seeking healthcare services there. So having that experience and making sure, one of the easiest questions I would always ask as an advocate is this going to harm or hinder accessibility to Indigenous peoples, Native American peoples? Um, because sometimes legislation might have unintended consequences. I would just probably add that this step is really exciting, and took a lot of thought process. I was asked by the community to take this step, and I just remember back to where I felt like I wasn't represented in government, to the point where I didn't even cast my first vote until I was about 23. And I always thought my vote didn't matter. I feel like I'm a very simple person. When I see folks who look like me and have the same experiences as me, I feel so empowered, and it makes myself think that, hey, I could do that too. And I really hope at the end of the day, whether, I win or lose in this endeavor, that I inspire other folks who look like me, who have the same experiences as me, that we belong in these spaces, and that these spaces were not created for us in mind, and that we need to be in these decision-making spaces because we hold so much power, just our presence alone. So imagine how much power and change we can have once we're in these spots, and advocating for our communities.